Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you to the committee meeting today. It's my understanding that there's been a bomb threat at the federal building, right? And because of that, we've had some traffic challenges. And because of the traffic challenges, people that should be here are not here yet or may not make it. So what we will we'll just go through this, and I'm joined by Mr. Reyes, and the actions will be deemed to communicate at the chair. I think, speaking of chairs, Mr. Reyes, are you being chair challenged?
I'm telling you.
This morning, I see you trying to...
I'm not a lowrider all the time.
All righty then. Okay, so like I said, it's Wednesday, January 19th, 2011. Anne Marie, we have several items on the consent calendar. It's my understanding that items 2 and 4, you have some amendments to. So why don't we start off with item 2?
Item 2, CRA and CLA reports relative to a contract amendment with Main Street Canoga Park for continued management of the Canoga Park Main Street program. And there is an amendment that increases the contract amount.
Okay.
That's been submitted to the clerk.
All right. Then, without objection, we'll adopt the CLA report on that item. Did you cut your hair? Item 3.
As amended.
Okay. On 2 as amended. All right. Item 3.
A haircut that won't go away.
A haircut that won't go away.
Item 3, okay. CRA report and joint resolution and CAO report relative to transfer of funds for the East Cahuenga Corridor pedestrian alley, transfer of funds not to exceed $760,600 for construction of improvements, and transfer of funds not to exceed $25,000 to the Bureau of Engineering for construction monitoring.
Okay, on that item, we'll adopt the CAO report. Item 4.
Correct, and that has an amendment as well. CRA report and joint resolution and CAO report relative to transfer of funds in an amount not to exceed $150,000 to Bureau of Street Services or Department of General Services for the construction of public improvements and landscaping improvements on Victory Boulevard and the Laurel Canyon Commercial Corridor redevelopment project area.
Okay, so we'll adopt the CAO report as amended on that. That brings us to item 5.
CRA report and joint resolution and CLA 2 report relative to the transfer of funds not to exceed $850,000 in the Department of Public Works for street widening and public improvements at Western Avenue and 5th Street in the Wilshire Center Koreatown Recovery Redevelopment Project area.
Okay, we'll adopt the CLA report on that item. That brings us to item 6.
CRA and CLA reports relative to a budget increase not to exceed $63,875 from $135,078 to $198,953 for Kane, Balmer, and Berkman for outside counsel legal services related to the formulation of a governing structure for the Biomed Technology Focus Area in the Adelante East Side Redevelopment Project area.
Okay. Mr. Reyes does have a question where it relates to that item.
Okay.
So let's hold that, finish the move on, and then we'll come back, Mr. Reyes. Okay, item 7.
Los Angeles Housing Department and CAO reports relative to implementation of the Homelessness Prevention and Rapid Rehousing Program funded by the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009.
Okay, we'll adopt the CAO report on that. Item 8.
Motion Alarcon Krikorian relative to the acceptance of $360,000 in CRA funds for the purchase and installation of security cameras in and around the Council District 7 redevelopment project area.
Okay, then we'll adopt that motion. So all of these items, other than item 6, will be deemed approved as a communique from the chair. Okay, item 6, do we have anybody here? Or is there anyone in particular you want to pose your questions to, Mr. Reyes?
No, it's very general.
Okay.
Good morning, Dan Rios, CRA.
Yes. Well, first, thank you for your hard work, and just want to get a sense for how we're balancing the governance structure, what weights are being put on that determines either the number of participants and or how are they being selected? Is it geographically based? Is it skill based? Can you just give us some insight as to how those weights are being measured?
Okay, a couple of considerations have come into play. We currently have publicly elected PAC for the Adelante East Side Redevelopment Project Area, Project Advisory Committee.
I'm sorry, can you speak into the microphone? I can't hear you very well.
Let me pull it in a little closer.
Thanks.
There we go. We have a PAC that assists and advises the agency for the Adelante East Side Redevelopment Project Area. The proposed merger between the Whiteside and the Adelante East Side project for the purposes of creating this biomed focus zone will have in it an advisory committee as a CAC, which is traditionally an appointed body, and it'll have representatives both from the area that would speak to the Adelante zone, or the city jurisdiction, if you will, and similarly representatives from the LA County area, known as Whiteside. So there will be representatives who are primarily stakeholders from the community, from the affected geography and the acreage that comprises the focus area, and folks who might stand up and volunteer to be recognized and participate as an advisor would also be considered. Since we don't have a governance structure established as of yet, with these actions and the recommendations we would get through the services of KBB, we would be able then to move forward and engage the community of potential stakeholders so that we could in fact establish an advisory committee.
I know District 1 has a small geographic area, but it's adjacent to Lincoln Park
Right.
and right on Main Street, which is one of the entryways into the hospital area.
True.
And so I'm trying to make sure that that doesn't become like the stepchild of the program, given its size. So if we can just keep our staff apprised as
Yes,
to when we begin to look at identifying and or nominating or appointing to make sure we are in the loop.
Sure, absolutely. Yes, I'm aware of the zone that's within Council District 1.
Right.
We currently have representatives from the area who actually sit and have been publicly elected into our project area committee,
Right.
who advise the agency on general CRA matters. So similarly, we would certainly solicit and engage the stakeholders from the community to ensure that they would get a seat and a voice in a proposed CAC to advise us on the biomed programs.
Well, hopefully, given the state of flux we are at the state level with the governor, we'll see just how far we take this. But thank you for all your hard work and getting it to this level.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, and thank you. And we've been joined by Councilmember Alarcon, so we do have a quorum at this time, Mr. City Attorney. So if you're comfortable, Richard, we've already taken action on items 2 through 5, and then 7 and 8, and then after what just occurred on item 6, then I would recommend that we adopt the CLA report. If you're comfortable, we'd like to put you as an aye on those items. Okay, so it's now been approved by the committee. Any word on our commissioner as of yet? Okay, then that will bring us to item 9. If we could have representatives come forward on that item.
LHD and CAO reports relative to authority to enter into loan agreements for top-ranked applicants for building retrofit work in response to the 2010 Round 3 Notice of Funding Availability, Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant, and to issue letters of commitment for Round 3 of the 2010 Affordable Housing Trust Fund and various actions related to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
Good morning, Helmi Hesrick, Los Angeles Housing Department. These are recommendations from NOFA Round 3, which was issued late last year. And the recommendations are really for 3 different funding sources. One funding source is Neighborhood Stabilization 2 program, of which we had $35 million available. However, only $10 million of the funds were available for new construction projects. All the applicants we had were new construction, so we're recommending only 2 projects of new construction under NSP. We also had resources available, which we issued a in the NOFA for mixed income projects. We had applicants under mixed income for the full amount of funds available, so we're recommending 2 mixed income projects, and the ARA funds for energy efficiency block grant, and I believe we have 10 total projects or 15 total projects under energy efficiency block grant. Tim, if you want to make a recommendation.
We also had the RFP also asked for proposals for 4 small city-owned properties that we've acquired through foreclosure or default, and we only got proposals on 2 of those structures. So we'll be asking to extend that portion of the NOFA and then report back when we have a sufficient number of proposals for all 4 of those sites.
Why did you think you didn't get any response for 2?
These are, small projects between 4 and 10 units, and one of the developers that we deal with all the time on small projects said that they just didn't know about it, that they weren't prepared to submit anything in this round, and because it was kind of a unique situation. We have the NSP monies and mixed income, and this is not the kinds of projects that we normally see. So a lot of developers that might have otherwise been interested didn't pay attention this time. But we've been told that at least on one, on 81st Street, that there is somebody that's very interested.
When you go out again, do you advertise differently, or?
Well, I think we in conjunction with this next round, where we usually we received over 30 applications, and I think we have everybody's full attention, and we made it aware that these properties are out there. If we're unsuccessful, we could ask to sell it at one of the final building at market rates through a broker that we have.
Okay. That's my understanding. Mr. Alarcon had some questions or concerns, and if you're ready, Richard, I'll turn it over to you.
My first question is the department aware that the San Fernando Valley did not secede from the City of Los Angeles? The department is aware that the Valley did not secede from the City of Los Angeles?
Yes.
Okay. Are any areas in the Valley eligible?
So wait a minute. Wait. So you're on a roll. You had a good one yesterday in council, and then you come back with this one today.
Oh.
I mean, you had a good line. I'm drawing a blank as to what it was yesterday,
Yeah.
but this one was good. Now, maybe they didn't get it initially, but I want you to know that your chair did.
Oh.
The succeed part. That was good.
I was just
and
curious
we've been joined by Mr. Cardenas.
Why out of
Did we succeed?
just curious why out of these millions of dollars, none of it goes to the San Fernando Valley, notwithstanding the fact that they have the highest foreclosure rate in some parts, particularly my district. And with regard to the energy, you anecdotally mentioned somebody that didn't know about it. Nobody even applied from most of the council districts in the San Fernando Valley. Did you do outreach to them? And in what form was that? And I can't believe that nobody applied, and 15 projects were approved, none in the San Fernando Valley.
There was actually one project approved in Councilman Cardenas' district, CDC.
Oh, the 16-unit project?
I think it's 18 units.
18 units? Oh, here it is, Vineland Place, yeah. Okay, so what's going on? How come the Valley, they don't have energy efficiency problems in the San Fernando Valley, is that what it is?
I think the nature, this grant was a new grant. That's one issue, that it wasn't...
It wasn't new in other parts of L.A.?
And the nature, excuse me, the nature of the buildings that would benefit from this type of money to retrofit are a certain size and a certain age. And I think those types of buildings are centered in the downtown, around the downtown core area. There are some outliers, but for the most part, that's the type of...
In the San Fernando Valley, we don't have buildings that qualify, is that what you're saying?
You do. However, most of the buildings the majority of the buildings that would benefit from this type of money are located in certain council districts.
So what was the outreach effort?
I know that we outreach to 100 different, it's the...
Specific to the San Fernando Valley, what was the outreach effort?
The energy efficiency block grant outreach effort was primarily directed at existing Loans, properties that already had loans given to them by the Los Angeles Housing Department. So
How many of those are in the San Fernando Valley?
I'm sorry, I don't know, so I'd have to get back to you.
Okay, well, you know, with regard to the NOFA in its entirety, one project, you know, 200 and...
Hello?
200, yeah, thank you. $264,000 out of how many millions?
There was 4.6 for the energy efficiency, and then
There was $35 million of NSP, Neighborhood Stabilization Program 2 funds. $10 million of that was available for new construction projects, and $25 million was available for rehab projects. We had no rehab projects come into the pipeline, so we did not make recommendations for $25 million.
What was the total amount of money you're allocating with this report, recommending for allocation in this report?
There was a total of $56 million.
$56 million. How much of that goes to the San Fernando Valley?
As we were saying, there's the one project with with
$264,000?
I'm the lucky winner.
We did not award $56 million. We're not making recommendations for $56.
That was my question.
That
How
was
much
what
is
was
being
available.
recommended for award?
$20 million.
20 million. Oh, that's much better. So what's that, 1%?
It's the battle.
264,000 represents about 1%. So I ask again, is the Housing Department aware that the San Fernando Valley did not secede from the City of Los Angeles?
It's a serious question, believe it or not.
We are
I represent
aware.
the Valley as well.
Yeah, we are aware
Well-
that San Fernando did not secede.
Well, it's not reflected in your report. And now tell me about this boosting thing that you do. You do a boosting in your grant award, so if one area doesn't have enough, you boost them by some formula. Well, tell me about the boosting.
Do you want to?
There are various public policy objectives that some are council-driven and some are came from the mayor's office as to certain priorities, objectives that we're trying to achieve. And so some of those are high cost. We give different boosts to projects that, for instance, remove blight or are in high-cost areas or in South LA or near transit-oriented development, and that increases their maximum loan amount by the X percent.
How many boosts do we have in the San Fernando Valley?
Well, a transit-oriented development would apply to the orange line. There are high-cost areas in the valley that would benefit from that. The recently adopted blight boost could apply to any blighted or underutilized property within the valley.
Yes, but none of them came through, or
Well, it mathematically raises.
how many boosts were used in other parts of the city?
In this particular funding round, we only had 4 projects that were eligible, and one of those was in a high-cost area in CD11.
What?
One of those was in a high-cost area in CD11 in Venice, and that was able to claim the high-cost boost.
And so, explain to me how an area that comprises more than 1/3 of the geographic area of Los Angeles didn't qualify for any of this $20 million, or 1%.
This is a very targeted set of funding. We looked at foreclosed vacant properties.
So Silmar, with the highest rate of foreclosure in the city of Los Angeles, were they involved? I mean, did you outreach to them? Did you go to the neighborhood council?
These are from multifamily projects only. And the development community sought out opportunities for new development, for new construction, which is really not the focus, the major focus of the NSP program.
So what's the valley is not a major focus? What did you say?
No,
What?
this part of the neighborhood stabilization funds was strictly for multifamily projects.
Of which
and-
there are none in the San Fernando Valley? What are you trying
Well,
to
we
say?
did receive 3 applications for funds for projects in the valley, in CDC.
And they didn't qualify. They were like ranked last?
Yes, they needed more money than other projects, relatively speaking. And
Because of the high cost, didn't they get a boost for being in a high-cost area?
that is not the only deciding factor. One of the projects, this Tobias Apartments, they would have been the highest ranked project, but it turns out that they were relying on state NSP funds from the State Housing Department, and in our process of due diligence, we determined that they were not going to receive those. So without that money...
They ended up being last.
They ended up being last. If they would have gotten that money, they would have been first, but they had claimed they were on the waiting list for funds, and the state couldn't confirm that they were ever actually going to get that money. And we have very tight timelines to spend these stimulus funds.
Well, I can't support your recommendations for either the energy grants or the other part of the NOFA recommendations, because I don't know what kind of process you're using. My staff asked numerous occasions to get a better understanding and could not get an understanding of how these are scored, and I find that that's insulting, first of all. But if you want my vote, you're going to have to do a better job of not only informing my office as to how this process takes place, but outreach to the Northeast San Fernando Valley in particular. This is miserable. $20 million out of $20 million, and it's almost like you're saying there's no poverty in the San Fernando Valley, when nothing could be further from the truth. So I can't support it.
They took these to make
Well,
these.
if I may, this is not the only source of funding that we have.
I'm talking about this source of funding.
I have a question.
Okay, before and I think I did announce that we were joined by Mr. Cardenas, and Mr. Cardenas, you will be next. Richard has some very valid points, and we represent the entire city of Los Angeles. Now, in looking at a lot of the projects that are going to be approved, I mean, if we take a positive action today, there are projects in Mr. Cardenas' district, Mr. Reyes, Ms. Perry's, Mr. Parks. So I'm going to move or recommend that we move forward, because I don't want to slow those projects up. But where it relates to the valley, and in Mr. Alarcon's district, one of the highest districts to have foreclosure problems, if I remember correctly. I don't know if you were second or first.
First in single family, second in commercial.
So we still have another 36 million, correct? That I know is a different, it's more restrictive, I guess. But we need to come up, there needs to be some level of commitment to outreach more in the valley, so that when we come back with a report, or not a report, but recommendations that have a tad more balance. Because, we're only as strong as our weakest link, so we've got to, go throughout the entire city and try to, do what we can.
Yeah, but Mr. Chair, I want to make it clear, I'll be requesting of the city controller an audit, a management audit of the process for evaluation, particularly this boosting that they do to boost people's scores, and we're going to be taking a much closer look at that.
No, and I think that you should.
I am.
And if this was, well, here I want to give you an opportunity to say it again. I think that you should.
I think I will.
Okay. Anyway, I'm a little uncomfortable, but again, because of the other projects, Richard, that's why I'm going to move forward if I get the support of the other colleagues that are on this committee. But Helmy, I think you wanted to say something, and then I'm going to turn it over to my friend, Mr. Cardenas.
Yes, I just want to say that there are over $130 million of neighborhood stabilization program funds, and this does not represent all of those funds. A lot of those funds are being directed at the Valley, and I think it's important to understand the full range of investment being made by the Housing Department in the districts in Los Angeles. What is before you today is multifamily program, and I want to emphasize that we are not recommending, we've not made recommendations for $25 million. So there's still $25 million that can be expended on multifamily under Neighborhood Stabilization Program. So only 2 projects were recommended in this recommendation. There's quite a bit more funding going into the Valley than what is seen in this report from the Housing Department.
Well, how can one see that?
Would be 2%.
We could share with you all of the funding recommendations that we've made and that we are in the process of making since we've had the neighborhood stabilization funds, because I think that includes the single-family residential. I think that will be much more informative about the investments in the Valley.
It may be in your best interest as a department to show some level of parity so that you can elevate comfort levels on the council as we move forward with whatever projects you want to do. With that said, Mr. Cardenas.
Yeah, thank you. You mentioned earlier, a few minutes ago, something about some is driven by the mayor's office and some is council driven. And I think that was in and around the boosting criteria.
I want to say the boost criteria has been part of the NOFA for some time, and it's been discussed with council. There's no boosts that are added without discussion. The boosts that are in there do not, they do have a mathematical influence on how projects are ranked, but it's actually relatively minor. The primary thing that makes the projects fall into priority order is how much they're asking for relative to how much the total gap is. If the least request from the department is really what ranks them highest. The boosts are transit-oriented development, South Los Angeles, high-income areas, and those have been part of the NOFA for several years. And we are recently adding in the new NOFA going forward, a boost for blighted properties. So projects that will be removing blight, which was just added as of this last round going forward.
So what were you referring to by some of it is driven by the mayor's office and some council driven? What was that? What was that?
There's a South LA initiative that the department's part of, and that was some years ago added to the criteria.
So that was council driven or mayor driven?
Well, there's the South LA initiative, I believe, was the director of the mayor's office.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it was the mayor and council jointly.
If I may, Rushmore Spontes with the Housing Department. Each and every time the NOFA is presented before this committee, there's discussions about weighting the scoring for these projects, and that is to provide a balance for the entire community to try to make sure that we have distribution of monies appropriately as well as where the needs are. And we're always modifying it based on what the results were from the prior NOFAs. We come to the committee with recommendations to try to provide balance. Now, we're still subject to what developers bring to the table. So we can't necessarily look in a crystal ball and know what projects are available or what projects are going to be submitted. We try to develop a NOFA which is going to provide a balanced playing field for all developers, whether it be in South Los Angeles, be San Fernando Valley. We try to provide a balanced playing field for those. We don't know ultimately who's going to submit the proposal. So it's somewhat of a guessing game as to who's going to submit what, but the purpose of the boosts, which are minor, as Helmy was saying, are there to try to provide a balanced playing field. So every time we come forward, we're going to come up with recommendations, and it's really subject to the committee's approval if they want to modify those, if they feel like there's underserved areas. We could boost certain projects by 20 points, say, in the San Fernando Valley, but if we don't get proposals in those particular areas, you're not going to have any projects in those areas. So it's a matter of a combination of scoring, but also what's being presented to the department when we release those NOFAs. We do the same level of outreach to the developer community, and sometimes it's a matter of there's more projects in certain areas more than there are in others. But the goal of this department is to provide a balance across the city.
Yeah, but Rushmore, on that note, I'm looking at Table 4, on page 4 of your LAHD transmittal, and of the 12 applications on Table 4, there's 12 applications, and 2 are being recommended as NSP2 projects, and they're both in CD8, but there are 3 in CD7 in the San Fernando Valley, and they run the gamut of how much. The 2 recommended are 4 million plus and 4 million plus, and there's one that is 1.5 million, one is 9.8 million, one is 5.5 million of the requested amount. So it runs the gamut of the amounts, and you got 2 recommended out of the 12, and for some internal reason, none of these 3 got recommended. But see, when you give committee members explanations like you just did, one explanation says, the amounts may have an effect, these other matters may have an effect, etc. And then all of a sudden you run 3 that run the gamut out of 12, and none of them made the cut. It leads me to wonder it's kind of like, I wonder, representing the San Fernando Valley, I wonder if just the odds are stacked against certain communities within the city of Los Angeles from day one. I mean, maybe because there's a South LA initiative that gobbles up a certain percentage, and then from what's left, then all of a sudden, the Valley just doesn't muster the booster points, or it doesn't have enough of a little of this and a little of that. Before you know it, we see a consistency where for every 10 projects funded by the housing department, we average 1 from the Valley. And then when you look at 1 year, 2 year, 1 cycle, 2 cycles, 10 cycles, and then you start to realize that, okay, maybe 1% seems a little dismal on this proposal, but when you look at maybe 10, 12% of 10 years worth of housing funding is going to the Valley, that's where people like us kind of wonder why more people aren't talking about seceding from Los Angeles. Rushmore, you've explained to me very eloquently, and I understand the logic of how we get our rear ends handed to us by cities that put all their eggs in one basket, in one project.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
And then they get that one project funded. They roll the dice, but they seem to be successful lately. Yet in Los Angeles, we try to, have as many good projects funded as possible. But maybe one of the things that we should look at within the housing department, for example, is maybe we should give $12 million to one project in the Valley to make sure that at least one Valley project actually gets done, right? It may be to the chagrin of the rest of Los Angeles, where maybe at 4 million times 3, we could have got 3 projects funded in South LA or East LA or CD1 or CD8 or what have you. Like I see those are the benefactors today in this proposal. Maybe that's one of the things we can do. Because quite frankly, there are people out in the Valley who are talking about, why aren't we our own city? Why aren't we our own entity? So we could just take care of me. So we could just take care of the Valley. And maybe the Valley, if it were to secede, maybe they would act like Long Beach and other cities and just go ahead and say, well, let's just submit one project this year.
Well, that certainly would be a policy of this body and the council to render that decision. We're subject to the mayor and council. Our job is to try to provide balance, as we've discussed. As it relates to NSP, I must say that there was a number of projects that were submitted within the neighborhood stabilization program. We had a cap of $10 million for new construction the mix of proposals we received did not really enable, quite frankly, we didn't receive the type of proposals we thought we were going to receive. We received more new construction than we actually had the allotment for. We had a maximum of $10 million. That's why you see such a limited number of projects that are being funded under NSP2, much less than actually what was made available. So that's why the proposal will be to leave this NOFA open for those NSP projects so that we can get the proper mix of NSP projects that are for rehab. The NSP program wasn't designed just to have new construction across the board. It's more to stabilize communities through taking existing projects that need to be rehabbed. So that explains at least the NSP portion. As it relates to a combination of boost that would, to increase the availability in certain parts of the city, that's strictly a policy decision. But from the housing department's perspective, I think it's our due diligence to provide an equitable approach to this. And fortunately, again, it goes back to what projects are made available. The NSP is something somewhat of an anomaly relative to the overall Affordable Housing Trust Fund process.
Well, it might be an anomaly, but there seems to be, at least from certain council members and certain people in the city, that there is a consistency. That, oops, once again, we got to wait for mañana or the next round for the valley to actually see a project being recommended and funded. When it comes to NSP, the NSP boundaries, what dictates those boundaries?
They were pre-selected sometime back when the NSP2 grant was submitted, and it was essentially a smaller portion of the NSP1 areas where it's defined by low or dropping property values, high unemployment rates, and several other categories. And there were rankings within the city of Los Angeles from 1 to 20, and those that had the highest economic downturns from 17 to 20, those categories were then selected. So that's where we have a very small pocket within NSP that we can actually receive proposals for.
So for all intent and purpose, as it goes in 2011, the NSP boundaries are set already?
Correct.
We've already let the feds know.
That was communicated, and it was through a competitive selection process, and we've been notified by HUD at this point that they're not inclined to allow for modifications because this was done on a competitive basis, and this is our first go-around as far as an open-ended competitive selection process for NSP. Primarily, we've been working through our nonprofit organization to acquire the properties, but we thought we would, rather than having one organization trying to track down proposals, we thought we would reverse the role and open it up and have developers bring proposals to us. Unfortunately, we didn't necessarily get the right mix, or at least the type of projects we were hoping to get. So again, it was what we received were new construction and not enough in the area of rehabilitation.
So NSP boundary amendments are subject to federal recognition?
That is correct.
We can't just say we have new information, we'd like the boundaries to be changed. It's not up to us to create.
No, it is not. It would be a substantial amendment to the grant application.
Mm-hmm. And were any of the 12 on table 4, did any of them not qualify because they were not in one of the NSP boundary areas?
Were any of these not?
I mean, the fact that they made the list of 12 and there's no asterisks, I'm assuming that they were in fact in the NSP boundaries.
Right. They all passed that threshold criteria.
Okay. So there are NSP boundaries in the San Fernando Valley?
There are.
Oh, yes.
In both primarily Council District 6 and 7.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Do they have boosts?
No. I don't believe there were any boosts for the NSP projects.
So the boost criteria don't seem to apply to CD 6 and 7, like the example was given in Venice.
No, they could apply to CD 6 or 7. You could be near the Metrolink station, or you could be no, they don't have a poverty area boost. I'm sorry, just the Metrolink would be
a transportation boost,
mm-hmm.
but not a poverty area boost.
Not
and
a
not a high.
South LA. We don't have a poverty boost. We have South LA boost, and then we have a high income area, and none of the NSP areas will fall into high income.
Thank you.
High income? High income.
High cost housing areas.
For a balanced committee approach, so we can target reach
However-
areas where we couldn't normally achieve because the property values are too high.
We are spending quite a bit of NSP in the valley areas on single-family residential, which is under a different program. And we do have,
Use terms like quite a bit, substantial, but you're not giving me any proportionality. That doesn't tell me anything.
I think we'd have to come back to you with sharing with you what we've acquired and rehabbed and are working on under NSP in the separate report.
Mr. Reyes has a
Yeah, I
statement, a
I
question.
just start from the bird's eye view. If you look at the big picture, I know we struggle with this notion of balance, and I know we've been referred to, I mean, at least my district been referred to as a beneficiary. But I am uncomfortable with this only because I know how much does move into the valley under different categories. I don't think we're capturing that. Perhaps for the sake of this committee's understanding of your approach, just give us that one shot from a bird's eye view of how much is actually going to the valley. Now, I know Councilman Larracon's been here since the early 90s and as an elected official, and I as a deputy and elected official, and we've seen the turbulence up and down, ways monies move into different areas of the city. After the earthquake, after the riots, I mean, we all went through our issues. But the notion and the wording of seceding, I think, is a serious one. And for the sake of one city, perhaps you should give us the benefit of understanding the whole picture. And maybe that's a summary page that goes, every time you come before this committee and you allot funds, you get that one shot of understanding what is being done in the city as just a introductory piece so that we understand the context of how these decisions are being made. Because I know there are times when I, feel dissatisfied because I realize maybe in my geographic area I don't have certain social and or built out environment conditions that doesn't qualify me for certain monies, and I bite my tongue. But I also know that there will be another time in which other issues come up and perhaps we will benefit. So it's a leveling out process. There's ups and downs. And that happens over time. But I think for your benefit and our benefit, if you can give us just that introductory one-page, maybe map of where monies went, so it's transparent, there's no hanky-panky, no backroom deals, that we actually know what we're doing with our monies, and we can understand and absorb when is certain areas turned to receive resources. Because I see you struggling with this one balancing point. It's easy for me to say because I look at the list and and I'll be blunt, I have, 4 or 5 projects that got funded? And, why should I complain? But this is not about me. This is not about my district. This is about the city. And so perhaps you can give us that one bird's eye view. I think it would help us understand your decision making.
I think we can.
And I would advocate the way Councilman Alarcon is advocating. I would be doing the same thing if I felt the way he did. But it's because what's in front of us. What's in front of us does not give us the perspective we need to understand how you're making decisions from the big picture, the bird's eye view.
That's a point well taken, Councilman, and we'll certainly provide that each time we come forward, not just through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, but through NSP and any other resources that are going into the community through the Housing Department.
Let me point out again.
Yes,
we
Mr.
requested
Alacon.
that information of the department, and they have not been forthright in presenting that to my staff. We asked for that information.
That's important.
No, and that, well, first of all, what Mr. Reyes said is definitely well said. And I think it's sound counsel. But then to hear from Mr. Alacon that type of information has been requested earlier on, that he has not received it. I mean, so somehow there's got to be a main focus to get that data out so that we don't have to have this type of a discussion. And so I know if I were you, I would want to have that because I wouldn't want to get chewed on if there is, in fact, a balance. So with that said, Sharon, I think what I'm going to ask for, I'm going to ask that we adopt the CAO report on this item, but we should probably in fairness to all of the members, do it roll call.
Councilmember Wesson,
Aye.
Councilmember Reyes,
Yes.
Councilmember Alarcon, Councilmember Cardenas.
Aye.
Okay. Then, again, without objection, we will adopt the CAO report on that. Now, before we go to item 1, Macaria, ever since I've been here, Ms. Flores has represented Mr. Cardenas as his staff on this, come here, has represented his staff on this committee, and I believe she represented him even before I became the chair. It has been, next week is her last committee. I'm highly disappointed, but that's for selfish reasons. Once I discovered that she was being given a larger role and more responsibility, I have to compliment Mr. Cardenas for recognizing talent and, putting you in a position where you can broaden your resume. But I do want to say that personally, I will miss you, and it is a little upsetting to me that you are replacing her with a guy. But anyway, I want everybody to know, because she's done banner work. She's a great, reliable staff person. This building runs based on people like you and a lot of the people that are in this room. So I'm going to miss you personally very much. So with that said, if we could read item 1.
Item 1, communication from the mayor relative to the appointment of Mr. Greg Lippi to the Community Redevelopment Agency Board of Commissioners for term ending November 4th, 2013.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Mr. Lippi just to stay seated for a few seconds because we have 2 public comment cards. Maya Zutler, Tracy Chavira. Tracy, I'm so sorry. I don't think I've ever pronounced your name accurately.
That's okay.
And that's because I'm challenged that way.
Good morning. Maya Zutler on behalf of VICA, the Valley Industry and Commerce Association, VICA is here today to express our strong support for the confirmation of Greg Lippi to the CRA Board of Commissioners. As past chairman of VICA, we have seen firsthand Mr. Lippi's more than decade of community service to the San Fernando Valley and across the city of Los Angeles. In addition, Mr. Lippi has exceptional qualifications that will be extremely valuable to the CRA Board of Commissioners to make sound strategic investments to create economic opportunity and improve the quality of life for Angelenos. His list of accomplishments are significant, and we believe that his strong background and experience will continue to benefit the city. VICA considers him an exceptional choice for the CRA Board of Commissioners, and we hope that you approve his nomination today. Thank you.
Nah, we got it. Tracy.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'd like to say ditto, but for the record.
Ditto works in this committee.
Just quickly, Tracy Chavira with Central City Association. I won't explain what CCA is. I know it speaks for itself. On behalf of our membership, I'm pleased to speak in support of the appointment of Greg Lippi to the Board of Commissioners of the CRA. With over 4 decades of experience in accounting and his rich and varied history of community involvement, we know that he will bring a depth of understanding to the board. Just as important, his experience with the community will help bring balance to the CRA board as it fulfills its mission of economic revitalization and neighborhood improvement. We are excited to collaborate with Mr. Lippi and the agency to get projects moving again, bring more investment dollars to the city, and help secure the city's economic footing. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lippi, please come forward. I had the pleasure to meet with Mr. Lippi not too long ago and found out that he kind of began in or around the Windsor Hills area of the city of Los Angeles, so he knows, kind of my side of town and Mr. Parks' side of town, and has been in the valley for quite a while, has been very active with VICA. to Mr. Cardenas and to Mr. Alarcon. He had a very close relationship with a former colleague of ours, Keith Richmond, who we served with in the state legislature, who recently just passed away. I was impressed with the meeting we had. But today you had some challenges trying to get here, it's my understanding.
Correct. Nothing big, just a little bomb scare on Los Angeles Street.
Yeah, I mean, it happens
Just
every
normal
day.
operating procedure.
Anyway, you know, we are getting ready to enter into probably the most important debate where it relates to the need for redevelopment agencies in this state. At this juncture, the state, the governor's office has a desire to eliminate enterprise zones and the CRA and what have you. And they suggest that monies would be returned to cities and counties to provide police services and a variety of other services. But I think the members of this committee believe in balance, and that we believe that there are blighted communities within the city of Los Angeles that have seen a turnaround, others that are waiting for their opportunity to see a turnaround. So we're going to have to delicately make an argument for balance. So I just kind of wanted to ask you this one question. If you are recommended, and I guarantee that you have my vote, how will you recommend that we proceed? Because this is going to be we have to be very artful as we move forward.
The economic development is something that's essential to this city, and I think, if we're talking about funds that might otherwise go to police and so on, one of the ways to stop crime is to prevent it in the first place. And blighted areas seem to me to be a breeding ground for crime. So if we can clean up those blighted areas, we're going to see the crime reduce substantially. Also, jobs. The agency is significant in developing jobs. Jobs are another thing that if people don't have, crime goes up. So we need to make sure that there are jobs. Additionally, as far as living conditions go, I was involved. I was on the board of, and I was on the board and the executive committee of Habitat for Humanity, San Fernando Valley and San Cruz Valley affiliate. And we developed communities. We started out to build houses, but we wound up developing communities. And we saw the change in the people that were able to have home ownership for the first time. And our feeling is these people became, to our understanding, much more productive than they ever were. And, to encourage economic growth, we need business to be here to provide for jobs. And businesses, it's my experience, when they're looking for a place to locate, they look for places with quality workforce and quality homes to be able to, for this workforce to live, and transportation. And quality workforce, I've found, requires happy people. Happy people are much more productive. And, people that just give up, yeah, people that are not happy and don't have homes to live in and don't have jobs are unhappy people, and they're not going to be productive when those jobs come in. So I think that, there's a number of areas that we need to address as far as showing what the CRA can do.
Well, one thing that I think that's going to be critical, and we will be working together as we move forward, is that our redevelopment agency, coordinate a lot of its efforts with the association that represents all of the agencies in the other jurisdictions so that we can, we're kind of on the same page. But when I think about, I think I read a document from the association that it said on a yearly basis that they create maybe 300,000 jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And that out of that 300,000 jobs, that 170,000 of those jobs are construction jobs. And with the building trades industry having an unemployment rate of about 45%, to me it just does not make sense to make it go even higher. But if there was ever a time where we're going to have to make very good arguments and work together, that time is now.
I agree.
Mr. Reyes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning.
Good morning.
Glad you made it.
Yeah, me too. Thanks.
I appreciated our conversation. We met earlier. It was last week, right?
I think it was a couple of weeks ago.
A couple of weeks ago. Okay, it's all a blur.
For me too.
What I appreciated the most was the fact that you were very straightforward as to what you know and what you don't know. And when we spoke of the Northeast and the East Side, it's an area that I'd like for you to get more acquainted with, and I'm hoping you and I can take a drive through the district.
Absolutely.
And go through these areas. And the reason why I bring that up is that for us as a city to fight for our CRA, it's critical that we define how its existence actually is improving the very same services the county is saying it needs. The state, when it indicates it needs certain services and because of CRAs they cannot implement, we need to prove how our work is actually meeting those goals. And so when we start quantifying, I know that's something that's in your skill set, and how we look at accounting and financing and the numbers, looking at the value of the land we right now control through the CRA and how that actually triggers a larger resource base for the public and for the needs and the mission of this municipal corporation. So from that point of view, I'm hoping that with your skill set, we see the kinds of action plans, programs emerge in the CRA where we can actually start profiling these capacities and how we are actually creating that larger pot.
I'm looking forward to that too.
Because it's at this juncture we're rezoning 66 acres in our district, and in those 66 acres, 40% is owned by government, if not by the city, by the state, by the county. And this is dormant, underused land that fits the role that area of the city had back in the 1940s and 50s. Now it's 60 years later. Populations have quadrupled and some places multiplied 5 times. And we still treat it as if it's the 1940s. And it doesn't work anymore. So we have residential, abutting industrial. We are now building parks, we're now building schools. But now we need to create the jobs. And with our ability to understand the value of that land, with your skill set, I think we can prove that with CRA we can multiply and create ancillary benefits and stimulate these multiplier impacts that creates jobs. And that's the multiplier we need to put very clear so that Joe Citizen can say, this is why we need the CRA. These are the jobs being created. And then we could fulfill the mantra, and you've alluded to it, that Father Greg Boyle has stated over and over again, nothing stops a bullet better than a job. And so when we look at those issues, I'm hoping we can start at least quantifying and understanding the significance of the CRA's role in this economy. And we need it now more than ever. So I look forward to working with you on that.
We agree, and I think we all have the same goals. And I'll use all the skills that I have to get us there.
Yeah, see, we on this committee, our jobs is jobs. I mean, that's what we all try to do. Mr. Alico.
Yeah, I worked with Greg on numerous projects for a whole bunch of years, and I can tell you that while he's an advocate for business and a representative of the Valley Industry and Commerce Association, as its president, he also has a very soft liberal social side, and very strong on environmental issues. And in fact, one of his greatest contributions to VICA was to ensure that they develop green policies, and so he is very similar to Bruce Ackerman, whose shoes he would be filling, in the sense that he has a very humble presentation, but he's very knowledgeable about the issues and understands the balance of politics and the resources that the CRA, for example, has to offer. Mr. Lippi, since we met, there's been quite a bit of transition coming from Sacramento. The agency proposed a fairly radical plan to create a nonprofit entity. Now, recent history, as we discussed, demonstrates that the agency has, when having an opportunity, bled resources from the CRA in my district and tried to feed it into. And I could talk about other issues in the past that we were able to prevent, but there have been efforts before to try and take money from our CRA zone and place it in other areas. And in fact, with the interest money, that's exactly what they did.
Mr. Alicone, could I interrupt for just one second? I need to ask the city attorney a question. Would it be possible, because Mr. Reyes has to go, to vote on this item but still have the discussion? Does that violate anything?
Well, you've had your public comment. I'm not sure clearly with the answer, but I don't think there's any harm in doing that.
Okay, so then if it's okay, and we can kick it back to you, and I think Mr. Cardenas has some things to say, but I know Mr. Reyes has to go.
I think I thought you were talking about take the vote of the whole committee, because I don't believe one committee member can vote and leave, and then the rest of the committee.
No, this is the whole committee.
Okay.
So without objection, then we'll recommend the appointment of Mr. Lippi. Now, with that said, you still have to stay here because you got to get the votes downstairs.
Not going anywhere.
So, Mr. Reyes, you can go do what you need to do. Mr. Alicone, please finish because you were very interesting.
So here's the thing. In the past, where we have been able to insert ourselves into the process, Mr. Cardenas and I representing the same community redevelopment area, it's because we've inserted ourselves into the process by virtue of the authority that we have as a city council over the CRA. This proposal to establish a nonprofit entity concerns me in that the lines of authority between the city council and the agency are not as clear, and it would then suggest to me that the resources having been pooled but generated out of the 7th, 6th, and 2nd council districts could be used in other parts of the city illegally. And, I hate to be like my predecessor, Councilman Bernardi, who sued the city of Los Angeles and the CRA and prevailed to establish a cap in the downtown CRA zone. But frankly, I think those options would have to be considered if I believe that money was being taken from our area and placed in another area that was defined as tax increment money generated from the 7th or 6th, 2nd council districts. So having said that, are you aware of this new plan that the CRA has come up with? Because nobody's talked to me about it.
Nobody's talked with me about it either. But I will say that, I was thinking about, what is the most important thing for me on CRA as to understanding before making a decision, and that is to talk with the council person whose district is most affected and see what their feelings are about it and get as much information as I can, because you know more about your district than I do, as do the others. And I agree with you as far as, and by the way, I'm not going to agree with everything, but I do agree as far as taking from one place and putting it somewhere else. It doesn't seem right. I'm in the valley.
Well, are you aware that some of the projects being submitted by some of the CRA areas are not shovel-ready, have not been vetted, and yet are on the list, whereas my project area only submitted projects that have been fully vetted and were approved? I don't think that's a good indication of fairness, and that's why my vote is very much opposed to the existing proposal that CRA has submitted. And as a former teacher, I could benefit just as easily from the money going to the schools. And so I am very much on the fence with regard to how CRA manages this idea of placing the money in such a way that the state cannot touch it. I'm not, and nobody's consulted with me on it whatsoever from the CRA. I have no reason to support it from that perspective, but more importantly, my complete perspective is to protect the money, the tax increment money that was generated from the Northeast San Fernando Valley, and the interest that I believe should stay in the Northeast San Fernando Valley, and I will fight vigilantly to protect it, if I have to stand alone in doing so. And I would hope that as a representative of the San Fernando Valley, you would do the same in the CRA.
Absolutely.
Before I go to Mr. Cardenas, I'll try to choose my words carefully here. I think that most council people have a concern or concerns where it relates to this plan that's been developed by the CRA. That's one of the reasons why I continued it, so that it could be vetted some more. But at this point, a lot of what's occurring, and I should have gotten with you yesterday, is tactical. But you feel me?
Feel you, brother.
Okay, with that said, Mr. Cardenas.
Thank you very much, Greg. I appreciate you volunteering your time. It's a lot of time to be a board member of the CRA, but very important that we have a proper perspective, a well-rounded perspective on that board. I believe that board is very much out of balance right now. It appears on some days that the CRA board, and to a certain degree, some of the staff over at CRA seem to be more interested in focusing, for example, on single-room occupancy housing projects rather than looking at economic development and always trying to find ways to funnel as much money, for example, to that category of responsibility, and acting more like a housing department than it is acting like a community redevelopment agency. And I just want to let you know that when you feel frustrated and you witness that, because you and I have had a conversation, and it's my understanding that I think you have a good, healthy perspective on what a community redevelopment agency should be like and what the responsibility of each individual board member and the board should be. It should be the focus on economic development, not exclusively, but primarily.
Sure.
So I just want to thank you for that perspective. And when you do feel frustrated, please feel comfortable to call me, let me and my office know what's going on so that we can actually get engaged and involved. Because unfortunately, what happens far too often is things are vetted, votes have been taken, politics have been played, et cetera. By the time it gets to the council, committee, or the council level. But if we can actually have proper and appropriate balanced dialogue as early as possible, I think that's healthy for the Community Redevelopment Agency and certainly healthy for the entire process.
I look
So
forward to
please
that.
feel comfortable to communicate with my office. You witnessed today one of the nuances that we have to contend with in different geographic areas of the city, and the Valley, rightfully so, sometimes has a lot to complain about when it comes to, oops, no projects in the Valley, or 1% of the money's going to the Valley, et cetera. So the earlier we can actually vet those concerns, I think the better it is for everyone. And I'm certainly going to try my best to talk to and work with some of the more troublesome board members. That troublesome from my perspective, troublesome in the sense that some people seem to have an agenda that has more to do with housing than it does with economic development, and have a focus, for example, more on downtown than any other part of the city. I have nothing against downtown, but I think when it comes to these kinds of matters, we have a CRA that represents all parts from all corners of the city, not just one area. We should have CRA board members that aren't focused almost singularly on one particular pet peeve. They need to be broader than that and make sure that they are considering and concerned with as many aspects as possible that they can be faced with, moving policy in a balanced way rather than just focus on these pet peeves. And that's been one of my concerns with the CRA board. But I believe that you're going to be a good addition, not only being from the Valley, but with your business background and the conversations you and I have had. So thank you very much for your perspective and your willingness to give of your time.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Cardenas. You hit the nail on the head. We have a responsibility to the entire district, and I'm without a doubt, the stronger the other areas become, downtown becomes stronger. So I agree with you on that 200%. Mr. Lippi, thank you for coming, but I have to acknowledge my city attorney. You gave me the opinion that I wanted, and you used all of your skill and all of your influence, and you got it right. So with that said, Anne Marie, is there any more business before this committee?
No, sir.
This committee's adjourned.
Thank you.